The rain came down in thin, relentless lines, blurring the fluorescent lights of the gas station into trembling halos. Ethan Parker hadn't planned to stop. He was tired, bone-deep tired. The kind that settled into a single father's shoulders after 12 hours of work, 2 school drop-offs, and a promise to make dinner he wasn't sure he had the energy to keep. His old sedan rolled in on fumes, dashboard blinking its warning like an accusation. That's when he saw her. She stood near pump number 4, one hand gripping the edge of her coat, the other resting protectively over her stomach. Pregnant. Very pregnant. Her shoulders shook as she cried, silently at first, then with a kind of quiet desperation that came from holding it in for too long. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't a hero. He didn't have the luxury of getting involved. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was waiting at home with a neighbor, trusting him to come back safe and on time. Still, his feet carried him forward before his mind could catch up. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, keeping his distance. She startled, wiping her face quickly, as though embarrassed to be seen unraveling in public. Up close, Ethan noticed she didn't look homeless or careless. Her coat was expensive, tailored, understated. Her shoes were polished but scuffed, like someone unused to walking long distances. "I'm fine," she said, too quickly. "Just tired." He nodded, the universal language of people who knew that word too well. "Do you need help?" She shook her head again, but her eyes flicked toward the empty pump. "My card stopped working. Phone battery's dead. I just need to get home." Ethan glanced at the meter. The tank was empty. Without another word, he pulled his wallet from his pocket and slid his card into the pump. "Let's get you enough to reach wherever you're going." Her eyes widened. "No, I can't." "You can," he said simply. "It's cold. And you shouldn't be standing out here like this." She hesitated, pride warring with exhaustion, then finally whispered, "Thank you." As the fuel flowed, silence settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. "My name's Ethan," he offered. "Clara," she replied. Her voice was steady now, but something guarded lived beneath it. They talked in fragments. Small things. The weather. How unpredictable cars could be. How nights always felt longer when you were alone. Ethan didn't mention that he was undercover, technically off duty tonight, though his work never really let him forget. He didn't mention the quiet investigation he'd been running for months into corporate corruption, fake charities, shell companies that siphoned millions while ordinary people drowned. Clara didn't mention anything either. Not the fact that she owned 3 companies. Not the board meeting she'd walked out of that afternoon. Not the lawyers who'd told her to stay calm while the man she trusted most tried to push her out of her own empire. When the pump clicked off, Ethan removed the nozzle and replaced it carefully. "That should get you there," he said. She swallowed. "I don't know how to thank you." He smiled faintly. "Just get home safe." She looked at him for a long moment, then surprised him by asking, "Are you married?" "No," he said. "Widowed." "I'm sorry." "So am I," he replied honestly. A beat passed. "I have a daughter," he added. "She's my whole world." Clara's hand tightened over her stomach. "I hope my child thinks that about me one day." "She will," Ethan said without hesitation. "You already look like you care more than you let on." Something in her expression cracked then, not fully, but enough to let emotion seep through. "People think strength means not needing help." "Strength," Ethan said quietly, "is knowing when to accept it." She nodded, eyes shining. A truck horn sounded nearby, breaking the moment. Clara climbed into her car, rolling down the window before starting the engine. "If I ever see you again," she said, "I'll pay you back." He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." She smiled, small, sincere. "We'll see." As she drove off, Ethan watched the red taillights disappear into the rain, unaware that the woman he'd just helped wasn't just another stranded stranger. She was the CEO of a multimillion-dollar corporation. And fate had just put her directly in the path of the one man whose investigation could either destroy her world or save it. The rain eased as Ethan pulled back onto the road, but the image of Clara stayed with him, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, the way she'd tried to stand tall while everything else seemed to be slipping. He told himself it was nothing. Just another human moment in a life full of them. By the time he reached home, Lily was asleep on the sofa, a book open on her chest. He lifted her carefully, carried her to bed, and tucked the blanket around her small shoulders. "Daddy," she murmured, half awake. I'm here, he whispered. She smiled, reassured, and drifted back into sleep. Later, as Ethan sat at the kitchen table reviewing files spread across worn wood, Clara's name appeared on his screen. Not her name exactly, but her face. A news alert blinked quietly. Clara Hayes, CEO of Hayes Industries, expecting first child amid boardroom turmoil. Ethan froze. The photo showed the same woman from the gas station, hair perfectly styled, expression controlled, power radiating through a tailored suit. The headline spoke of internal disputes, hostile takeovers, and an anonymous whistleblower who had triggered an investigation into offshore accounts. His investigation. He leaned back, rubbing a hand over his face. So that's who you are, he murmured. Over the following days, Clara was everywhere. On television screens in cafes, on financial pages, her name whispered in conversations about power and betrayal. Ethan studied the details with professional distance, but something inside him resisted reducing her to a case file. She hadn't looked like a woman in control that night. She'd looked terrified. At work, the investigation intensified. Evidence suggested that Hayes Industries was being used as a front, but the deeper Ethan dug, the less sense the accusations made. Funds were moving, yes, but not to Clara. Away from her. Someone close. Someone trusted. Then, one evening, fate intervened again. Ethan stopped at the same gas station, this time with Lily in the back seat, chattering about school. As he stepped out to pay, he heard a familiar voice. Ethan. He turned. Clara stood near the entrance, coat draped loosely, one hand on her belly. She looked healthier, steadier, but her eyes lit up with genuine recognition. You came back, she said. So did you, he replied, surprised by the warmth that crept into his voice. Lily leaned out of the car window. Daddy, who's that? Ethan hesitated. A friend. Clara smiled softly at the child. You must be Lily. Lily beamed. Daddy says my name like it's special. That's because it is, Clara said, crouching slightly despite her condition. Just like you. Something in Ethan's chest tightened. They talked, carefully at first. Coffee turned into conversation. Conversation into something easier. Clara admitted she'd been living out of hotels lately, avoiding her own home, unsure who she could trust. I don't feel safe, she confessed quietly. Not in my office. Not with my board. And now, not even with my name. Ethan said nothing, though every instinct in him was alert. You don't have to tell me anything, she added quickly. You felt safe. He met her gaze. Sometimes the people who look the strongest are the ones who need safety the most. She exhaled, as though she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Days later, she called him. Her voice was tight. Someone broke into my apartment. Ethan was there in minutes. Lily safely dropped with a neighbor. The place was ransacked, but nothing obvious was taken. They wanted to scare me, Clara whispered. Ethan scanned the room, his training clicking into place. They wanted you quiet. She looked at him sharply. You sound like you've seen this before. He hesitated. The truth stood between them now, heavy and unavoidable. I need to tell you something, he said. But once I do, things change. She nodded. They already have. He told her then. About his work. About the investigation. About how her company had landed on his radar long before he met her. She didn't interrupt. She didn't deny. When he finished, she sat down slowly, one hand over her stomach, the other gripping the armrest. So you think I'm the villain, she said quietly. No, Ethan replied. I think you're being set up. Her eyes filled, not with fear this time, but relief. Then help me, she said. Please. He nodded once. I already am. What followed was a fragile alliance. Late-night meetings. Shared files. Careful conversations whispered over coffee cups and exhaustion. Ethan uncovered forged signatures, manipulated accounts, a trail leading back to her second-in-command, a man who had smiled beside her in press photos while quietly hollowing out her empire. As the net tightened, danger grew closer. Threats appeared. Anonymous messages. A car that followed too closely one night. And through it all, Clara leaned on Ethan, not as a CEO, not as a case, but as a woman carrying a child into an uncertain world. One night, as they stood in her temporary safe apartment, rain tapping softly against the windows, she looked at him and said, I don't know how I would have survived this without you. He met her gaze, feeling the weight of everything unspoken. You would have. But I'm glad you didn't have to. Neither of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street. Or the figure inside, watching. Waiting. The black sedan blended too easily with the night, its engine idling low, patient. Inside, the man behind the wheel watched the building with the calm focus of someone who believed time was on his side. Inside the apartment, Clara rubbed her arms, an unease she couldn't explain settling under her skin. Ethan noticed immediately. What is it? He asked. I don't know, she said. It feels like the air just changed. Ethan moved toward the window, careful not to draw attention, peering through the narrow gap between the curtains. He didn't see the sedan, but he saw enough, an instinctive tightening in his chest, the familiar sense of being observed. We should keep the lights low tonight, he said evenly. And no unnecessary movement. She studied him. Someone's out there, isn't there? Maybe, he said. Or maybe I'm being cautious. She nodded, trusting him without question. Over the next few days, the pressure increased. Ethan traced more financial trails, each one confirming the same truth. Clara's deputy had been moving money through subsidiaries registered under false names, siphoning funds while feeding the board carefully curated lies. Worse, he'd positioned Clara as the inevitable scapegoat. She trusted him, Clara said one night, voice hollow. I trusted him with everything. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and understood that betrayal like this cut deeper than any public accusation. That doesn't make you weak, he said. It makes you human. She laughed softly, without humor. Funny. That's the one thing the board doesn't want me to be. The following morning, Lily insisted on meeting the nice lady again. Clara welcomed her with surprising ease, kneeling despite her condition to listen to Lily's endless stories. Watching them together stirred something quiet and aching in Ethan. You're good with her, he said later. Clara smiled faintly. I'm trying to be brave for the one I haven't met yet. That afternoon, Ethan received a message that made his blood run cold. The deputy knew. Not everything, but enough. Enough to panic. Enough to move from quiet manipulation to reckless action. That night, the sedan followed them again, closer this time. When Ethan changed lanes, it mirrored him. When he slowed, it slowed too. Seatbelt, he said calmly to Lily. And stay quiet for Daddy, okay? Clara's hand flew to her stomach. Ethan? I've got this, he said, though his heart hammered. He took a sharp turn into a busy, well-lit street, then another into a police precinct parking lot. The sedan peeled away immediately. Clara let out a shaky breath. That wasn't coincidence. No, Ethan agreed. That was a warning. The next days blurred together in tension. Ethan arranged additional protection without revealing too much. Clara moved less, spoke only on secure lines, trusted only him. One evening, as they reviewed documents at the kitchen table, she suddenly pushed the papers away. I'm tired of hiding, she said. He looked up sharply. This isn't hiding. It's surviving. And what kind of world am I bringing my child into if I spend it afraid? She asked. He had no answer for that. Instead, he reached across the table, covering her hand with his. The touch was steady, grounding, and for a moment, neither of them pulled away. I won't let anything happen to you, he said quietly. She met his eyes. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll try. Something shifted then, not dramatically, not with words, but with understanding. Two people carrying different kinds of weight, choosing not to set it down alone. The break came sooner than expected. A whistleblower inside the company, spooked, desperate, came forward with hard evidence. Recorded calls. Signed orders. Proof that Clara's deputy had planned to flee the country within days. The arrest warrant was issued quietly. But the deputy didn't wait. The night before authorities could move, Clara went into early labor. It started with a sharp pain that stole her breath, followed by another, stronger than the first. Panic flickered across her face. Ethan, she whispered. Something's wrong. He was at her side instantly. Okay. We're going to the hospital. Halfway there, traffic ground to a halt. And then, the black sedan appeared. This time, it didn't follow. It blocked the road. Ethan swore under his breath, pulling the car to a stop, positioning it protectively. His hand went instinctively to where his weapon would normally be, then remembered he wasn't officially on duty. The sedan's door opened. The deputy stepped out, face twisted with desperation and fury. "Get out of the car," he shouted. "Now." Clara screamed as another contraction hit. Ethan stepped out slowly, hands visible. "There's a pregnant woman in labor. This doesn't have to end badly." "It already has," the man snarled. "She ruined everything." Ethan's mind raced. Timing, distance, angles. One wrong move and sirens. Distant, but growing louder. The deputy hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Ethan lunged. The struggle was brutal and fast, years of training meeting pure panic. The deputy went down hard just as police vehicles screeched to a halt. Ethan barely registered the shouts as he scrambled back to the car. Clara was crying, not from fear now, but from pain. "You're safe," he said, gripping the wheel as he sped toward the hospital. "You're both safe." Hours later, exhausted and shaking, Ethan stood outside a hospital room as a newborn's cry cut through the air. A nurse smiled at him. "She's asking for you." Inside, Clara lay pale but radiant, a tiny bundle resting against her chest. "She's beautiful," Ethan whispered. Clara looked at him, eyes full. "You saved us." He shook his head. "You saved yourself. I just showed up." She reached for his hand, holding it with quiet certainty. And as he looked at the woman, the child, and the fragile peace settling over them, Ethan realized that the most dangerous undercover mission he'd ever walked into wasn't about corruption or money. It was about trust. And love. And the choice to stay. The days that followed felt unreal, as though time itself had softened out of respect. The deputy's arrest made headlines by morning. Commentators spoke of greed, betrayal, corporate collapse narrowly avoided. Clara's name was cleared with a speed that surprised even her lawyers. Evidence was overwhelming. There was no ambiguity left to exploit. Ethan watched the news from the stiff hospital chair beside her bed, Lily asleep against his shoulder, her small fingers curled into his jacket. Clara lay propped up by pillows, exhausted but calm, her daughter breathing in gentle, determined rhythms against her chest. "You didn't plan any of this," Clara said quietly, watching him. "No," Ethan replied. "Life usually ignores plans." She smiled faintly. "Still, you walked into it anyway." He shifted, careful not to wake Lily. "So did you?" The hospital room became a kind of sanctuary. Doctors came and went. Lawyers waited politely outside, told firmly to come back later. The world slowed to the pace of a newborn's needs, feeding, sleeping, breathing. Clara named her daughter Eleanor. "Strong," Lily announced solemnly when she was introduced. "She looks like she knows things." Clara laughed softly, the sound lighter than Ethan had ever heard it. "I hope she knows kindness," she said. Lily nodded, satisfied. "Daddy says that's the most important one." When they were discharged, security was discreet but present. Clara moved into a quieter house outside the city. Temporary, she insisted, until the dust settled. Ethan helped where he could, fixing things that didn't need fixing, standing watch when she slept. They fell into a rhythm neither named. Mornings began with Lily racing Eleanor's cries to the kitchen, afternoons with Clara working carefully from home, rebuilding trust with employees who had waited for her return. Ethan balanced his work with school runs and late-night calls, his investigation officially closed but his instincts still sharp. One evening, weeks later, Clara sat at the dining table reviewing documents when she stopped abruptly. "You could have turned me in," she said. Ethan looked up from helping Lily with homework. "For what?" "For suspicion. For proximity. For being easier than digging deeper," she said. "People would have believed it." "Yes," he admitted. "They would have." "Why didn't you?" He considered the question carefully. "Because I don't punish people for surviving storms they didn't create." She watched him for a long moment, something like resolve settling in her expression. The press eventually moved on. New scandals replaced old ones. Clara's return to the boardroom was measured, deliberate. She spoke less, listened more. Those who underestimated her quickly learned not to do it twice. Ethan attended one meeting, just one, sitting quietly at the back as an observer. When a board member questioned Clara's judgment, she answered without raising her voice, laying out facts with surgical precision. Respect followed, whether they wanted it to or not. Afterward, in the elevator, she exhaled deeply. "That used to terrify me." "What?" Ethan asked. "Standing alone in a room full of people who wanted something from me," she said. "It doesn't anymore."
He smiled.
That's because you know who you are. The words stayed with her. At home, Lily and Eleanor grew accustomed to each other's presence, one loud and curious, the other small and observant. Clara watched them often, an ache of gratitude in her chest. One night, long after both girls were asleep, Clara found Ethan on the back porch, staring into the dark.
"You're thinking too hard," she said.
"Occupational hazard," he replied. She joined him, wrapping a shawl tighter around her shoulders. "You don't have to stay."
He glanced at her.
"Is that what you want?"
"No," she said honestly. "But I need to know you're here because you choose to be."
"Not because you feel responsible." He considered her words, then nodded. "I choose this." Her breath caught, not from surprise, but from the quiet certainty of it. Weeks later, a letter arrived for Ethan.
An offer. A promotion. Higher profile. More danger.
More distance.
He stared at it for a long time before folding it and setting it aside.
Clara found it later, untouched. "You're not going to open it."
"I already know what it says," he replied.
"And?" she asked gently. "And I don't want to keep living undercover," he said.
"Not with them." She didn't answer immediately.
Instead, she reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his.
"That's not a small choice," she said. "I know."
They stood there, the house quiet around them, the future pressing in with all its unanswered questions. Outside, the night settled in, peaceful, watchful. And inside, two lives that had collided by chance continued to weave themselves together, not loudly, not perfectly, but with intention, one decision at a time.
The choice didn't announce itself as heroic.
It arrived quietly, the way real endings and real beginnings always do. Ethan declined the promotion without ceremony.
No speech. No justification. Just a signature and a steady hand.
For the first time in years, he stepped out of the shadows, not because the danger had disappeared, but because the life waiting for him mattered more than the chase. Clara watched that decision change him.
He slept better.
Laughed more easily. Became present in a way that no training could teach. Lily noticed it too. "You don't look tired all the time anymore," she told him one morning, cereal spoon paused midair.
He smiled.
"Maybe I finally learned how to rest." Clara returned fully to her role as CEO, but she did it differently now.
She dismantled the systems that had allowed silence to grow.
She promoted transparency, listened to the voices she once walked past in a hurry, and built safeguards that made betrayal harder to hide. The company thrived, not because it was feared, but because it was trusted.
And still, she never forgot the night at the gas station.
She never forgot what it felt like to be powerless, pregnant, and unseen, except by one man who had nothing to gain.
Months passed.
Eleanor learned to smile.
Lily learned to teach her how to laugh.
The house filled with ordinary chaos, spilled milk, late nights, half-finished conversations interrupted by cries and giggles. One evening, as autumn light filtered through the windows, Clara stood in the kitchen watching Ethan help Lily with homework while gently rocking Eleanor with his foot. "This," she said softly, "was never part of the plan."
Ethan looked up.
"Most of the best things aren't." Later that night, after the girls were asleep, Clara handed him a small envelope.
He frowned.
"That look usually means trouble."
She smiled.
"Just open it." Inside was a document, not a contract, not a legal demand, but a proposal.
She created a foundation. One designed to protect whistleblowers. To support people trapped between truth and fear. To make sure no one else had to choose between safety and honesty the way she had.
At the bottom of the page, she'd written a single line in her own hand.
"I want you to lead this with me."
Ethan looked at her, stunned.
"You don't need me for this." "I know," she said.
"I want you."
Not as protection.
Not as obligation.
As partnership.
He nodded slowly, emotion tightening his throat.
"Then I'm in."
Years later, a reporter would ask Clara what she considered her greatest success. They expected a number.
A merger. A headline.
Instead, she said, learning that strength doesn't mean standing alone. And when Ethan was asked why he'd walked away from the kind of career men spent their lives chasing, he answered simply, "Because I finally found something worth coming home to." On a quiet evening long after the world had moved on, Ethan stopped at a familiar gas station, this time with both girls in the back seat. The lights hummed. The air smelled of rain. A young woman stood near a pump, arguing with a broken card reader, frustration written across her face. Ethan hesitated only a second before stepping out.
"Hey," he said gently.
"Looks like you could use a hand." From the car, Clara watched, Eleanor asleep against her shoulder, Lily peering out the window with curiosity. She smiled, not because she knew how the moment would end, but because she knew exactly who he was.
Some lives are built on power. Others are built on kindness. And the rarest ones, the ones that last,
are built when two people choose, again and again, to stop running, to be seen, and to stay.